Bill Maher never imagined he'd find himself at a private White House dinner with Donald Trump and Kid Rock. But when he pressed Trump on a potential third term, the answer shook everyone at the table. Maher was 2 sips into his second glass of Pinot Noir when his phone buzzed. Unknown number, DC area code. He almost let it go to voicemail, but something told him to pick up. "Bill, it's Bob." Kid Rock. That voice, gritty, nasal, unmistakable. Maher sat up, curious. "What do you want, Bob?" "Dinner at the White House. Trump wants you there." "Just a small group. Dana White's coming too." Maher laughed. Had to be a joke. But Kid Rock was serious. "Wait, you're saying Trump invited me? To a private dinner?" "Yeah. I told him it'd be good for the room. Tension, different views, whatever. Just come, man. You'd be surprised what happens when people sit down and break bread. Everything about it felt wrong, and yet a part of him, the same instinct that had made him a career contrarian, whispered, "Go." He didn't commit right away. He asked for the date, told Bob he'd think about it, and hung up. Then he sat alone in his quiet LA home, wrestling with a decision most people would never have to consider. He wasn't scared. He'd sparred with tougher opponents than Trump. But the optics, the backlash, he could already see the headlines. Still, what if something good actually came of it? 3 days later, he stepped off a flight at BWI and slid into a black SUV bound for Pennsylvania Avenue. The driver didn't speak. Maher didn't need him to. As they approached the White House gates, a cold gust of reality blew through the open window. He rolled it up. Inside, a staffer escorted him past polished floors and oil-painted portraits, leading him into a softly lit dining room. And there they were. Donald Trump at the head of the table. Kid Rock already halfway through a drink. Dana White, arms crossed, nodding along to something Trump had just said. The room stilled when Maher walked in. Trump stood, that half-smirk of his locked-in place. "Well, look who finally showed up. I thought you were too scared to come, Bill." "I'm not scared of awkward dinners, just bad food," Maher shot back, shaking Trump's hand. Kid Rock chuckled. Dana gave a nod of approval. They sat. For 10 minutes, it was all small talk. Trump brought up real-time's ratings. Kid Rock made a joke about liberals and gluten. Dana scrolled his phone like he didn't care who noticed. Then the conversation shifted. The tone dropped. Politics crept in. Not forced, not hostile. Just real. And as the first course arrived, so did the first real shot across the bow. Trump leaned in. "So, Bill, tell me, do you actually believe this country is better off now than it was 4 years ago?" Before Maher could answer, a server placed a plate of seared scallops in front of him. The moment hung, he picked up his fork, smiled. No warmth. "Depends on who you ask." Kid Rock raised his glass. "Here we go." But the real tension was still simmering, just below the surface. The scallops were good, surprisingly good. Not that anyone was really paying attention to the food. Maher scanned. The table. Trump gestured with his knife like a pointer as he spoke. Kid Rock leaned back, boots under the table, sipping something dark from a lowball glass. Dana White barely touched his plate, watching the exchange like a front-row spectator at a fight he wasn't sure he wanted to break out. Then Trump cut into his steak. "Everyone here agrees the border's a disaster, right?" Maher looked up, chewing. He didn't answer right away. Not because he didn't have something to say, but because he knew the game. Trump thrived on quick reactions, interruptions, a punchline to play off. But Maher was a comic. He knew timing. Finally, he spoke. "I think it's complicated." He let that sit for a beat. "If you actually want solutions, not just campaign slogans, you've got to be honest about why people are coming here in the first place. It's not just about walls and fences." Trump grunted. "You want open borders? Just say it." Maher exhaled. "I want rational policy, not a circus." That landed harder than he expected. For a second silence, then Kid Rock leaned in. "Hey, we're all eating dinner here. Nobody's throwing chairs. Kid Rock smirked, glancing at Dana White. Yet, Dana cracked a grin. Don't tempt me. Trump waved his fork, breaking the tension. Look, I didn't invite you here to fight. I actually like you, Bill. You talk a lot of trash, but at least you're not a robot reading off a cue card like most of these other clowns. Maher raised an eyebrow. That's the nicest insult I've heard all week. A strange chemistry was forming. Not friendship exactly, but something like mutual recognition. They were all public figures, all used to controversy, all familiar with the way crowds either roared or booed on command. But none of that mattered here. Not in this room. Not right now. Kid Rock turned to Maher. You know what blows my mind? The way people act like we can't even talk anymore. We're not supposed to agree on everything. That's not the point. But the second you say something someone doesn't like, bam. You're a Nazi or a snowflake. Maher took a sip of wine. I've been canceled more times than your last 5 tour stops. Kid Rock laughed. And yet here we are. The table chuckled. Even Trump smiled. Dana finally chimed in. We live in a time where everyone's looking to be offended, like they want to be mad. I run fights for a living. You'd think people would want peace outside the cage. Nope, they bring the cage with them. That one hit hard. For a moment, nobody spoke. They just sat there chewing, thinking. Even Trump seemed quieter, staring at his plate. Then he looked up. You know what I miss? He said. Back when guys could argue politics and still grab a drink after. My father used to yell at our neighbor every Sunday morning. By the afternoon, they were watching football together. Maher nodded. Because back then, people didn't confuse disagreement with betrayal. Trump tapped the table. Exactly. It was surreal. A moment of accidental agreement. A liberal comic. A conservative ex-president. A wild rocker. A fight promoter. Finding common ground. Not over policy, not over politics, but over something bigger. The idea that talking matters, especially when it's uncomfortable. Kid Rock lifted his glass to conversations people swear we're not supposed to have. Everyone clinked glasses, even Maher. But as the wine flowed and the tension eased, one question still lingered in Maher's mind, and he wasn't leaving without asking it. The second course arrived. Roasted duck with sweet potato mash glazed in something Maher couldn't quite identify but liked anyway. By now, the formality had faded. They weren't politicians, rock stars, or TV hosts. They were just 4 guys at a dinner table. Too much history between them. Too many headlines, and just enough respect to not start yelling. Trump wiped his mouth with a linen napkin. Let me ask you something, Bill. Be honest. What's your issue with me? Not the showbiz stuff. The real deal. Off the record. Maher leaned back. He wasn't surprised by the question. He'd been expecting it. You bulldoze the truth, he said. You say things you know aren't always real, but your people believe them, and that's dangerous. Trump nodded, almost thoughtfully. And the media doesn't do the same to me? Kid Rock cut in before Maher could answer. Look, I ain't trying to referee, but let's not act like mainstream anything isn't picking sides these days. Everyone's selling something. Dana leaned forward. It's not just media. It's everything. Schools, sports, companies. Everybody's terrified to say the wrong thing. That's the real problem. Nobody's allowed to screw up anymore. Exactly, Trump said. You say the wrong thing once and you're done. They rip you apart. That's what they call being woke, right? It's not justice, it's punishment. Maher sat up. No. Being woke, when it's done right, is about awareness, recognizing patterns of injustice and inequality. But what you're describing? That's social media performance art. That's fear dressed up as virtue. Kid Rock smirked. You just called your own people fake. Maher didn't flinch. I called everyone fake. Left, right, middle, it doesn't matter. We're all playing roles now. Half the time I don't even know who's being real anymore. The room went still. Not tense, just still. Because even the most cynical among them couldn't deny the truth in that. Trump pushed his plate forward and folded his arms. So what do we do about it? Maher exhaled, shrugged. We start by admitting we're all full of crap sometimes. He let that sink in. Then maybe, we listen a little more than we tweet. Dana smirked. That's rich, coming from the guy with one of the most sarcastic shows on TV. Maher grinned. Sarcasm is a coping mechanism. Try sitting through 3 years of cable news without it, Bill muttered. Kid Rock chuckled low and slow. Fair. Trump narrowed his eyes at Maher. You ever think I'm right about anything? There it was. The real question. Not for laughs. Not for ratings. Just a man, ego in check for a rare second, asking someone he considered an adversary if he saw any value in what he'd done. Maher didn't rush to answer. He took a beat. Yeah, he finally said. I think you nailed something about immigration. People want borders. They just don't want cruelty. You pushed it too far, but you weren't wrong that a country needs structure. Trump didn't smile. He just gave a slow nod. Maher studied him. You're not who I thought you'd be. He exhaled. Still don't trust you, but I get why people do. Kid Rock glanced between them. This is like watching a bald eagle fist bump a vegan. Weird as hell, but kind of beautiful. They laughed. Then Dinah stretched. I need air. Gonna hit the balcony for a sec. Trump stood too. Let's take a walk. I want to show you something. They pushed back from the table. Staff moved in, clearing plates as they made their way toward the hallway. But what Trump wanted to show them wasn't a historical painting or some new piece of decor. It was something far more symbolic, and the conversation was about to get a lot more personal. The hallway was quiet except for the muted click of their shoes against polished floors. A soft light guided them through the east wing. A staffer followed several paces behind, saying nothing. Trump led the way, hands clasped behind his back, walking with that deliberate stride. Half showman, half general. He didn't say where they were going. He just walked, and they followed. Eventually, they stopped in front of a set of heavy, white doors. 2 guards stood off to the side. Trump turned slightly and nodded toward them. Lincoln bedroom, he said. You've all seen pictures. Never seen it in person, have you? No one answered. They didn't have to. Trump opened the doors himself. The room was dim, lit only by a tall lamp in the corner and a soft wall sconce above the bed. In the center stood a thick mahogany desk, cordoned off by a red velvet rope. On the wall, framed under glass, the Gettysburg Address, handwritten. The air felt heavier in here. Maher stepped forward slowly. So this is where Lincoln slept. Huh? Trump lingered near the door, hands in his pockets. I like to bring people here when I think they need to remember something. Maher turned. And what's that? Trump met his gaze. That even the greatest presidents were hated while they were alive. No punchline, no smirk. Just that sentence, sitting in the air like smoke. Dana crossed his arms, glancing at the framed speech. Kid Rock stayed near the back, unusually quiet. Maher exhaled. That's true. Lincoln was called a tyrant, a clown. He tore the country apart to save it. Trump nodded. Sound familiar? Maher didn't answer. He just looked at the desk, then at the glass-encased speech. Then, without hesitation, he asked the question. You thinking of running for a 3rd term? His voice was low but direct. The room shifted. Dana blinked. Kid Rock stiffened slightly. Trump didn't flinch. He stepped forward, slow and steady, until he was just across from Maher. I'm thinking a lot of things, he said. But we'll see how strong the country is by the time we get to that bridge. Maher's expression didn't change. That's not a no. Trump leaned against the bedpost, his voice quieter now. They said I couldn't win once. I did. A pause. Then they said I wouldn't win again. Another beat. I will. He let that sink in before adding, after that, who knows? Kid Rock finally spoke. If the rules get changed, someone's gonna change them. That's how it works. Maher shook his head. But democracy only works if people respect the rules even when they lose. Trump met his eyes. And what if the game's rigged? Maher didn't blink. No system's perfect, but undermining it just because you don't like the outcome, that's how democracies break. Dana shifted. It's a slippery slope. One guy decides the rules don't apply to him. Eventually, nobody plays fair. Trump gave a dry smile. Maybe we've been playing fair too long. That's why we're losing. Silence. For a second, nobody knew what to say. Then Maher took a step forward, breaking it. You know what the difference is between you and Lincoln? Trump raised an eyebrow. Go on? Maher didn't hesitate. Lincoln wanted to hold the country together. A beat. You want to win it. Trump didn't argue. He just looked past Maher, back at the Gettysburg Address behind glass. The words written in Lincoln's own hand. The ones etched into history by a man who never had Twitter, never made a campaign hat, and never tried to trademark the word truth. Maher exhaled, eyes still on the speech. That speech, he murmured. Maher nodded toward the wall. 271 words. No ego, no slogans, just the basics. Maybe it's time we go back to that. Trump said nothing. Kid Rock cleared his throat. I need a drink. They chuckled, but the tension didn't lift. Not really. Trump turned back toward the hallway. Come on, let's finish the tour. They followed. But the air felt different now. Something unspoken had been planted, and it wasn't going away anytime soon. The group moved back through the corridor, this time slower. It wasn't the kind of silence that demanded attention. It was the kind that lingered, heavy, like they were all privately unpacking what had just happened in that room. Trump didn't speak for a while. He led them through a side hall, into a quieter part of the residence, past portraits of presidents most. Americans forget on tests, the kind of hallway tour guides don't cover. Finally, Trump broke the silence. I don't hate you, Bill, you know that, right? Maher glanced over, unsure whether to laugh or take it seriously. You're hard to hate back when you say things like that. He smirked. Then you tweet, and it all unravels. Kid Rock let out a dry laugh. Dana stayed a few steps behind, arms crossed, still chewing on the third-term talk. Trump stopped in front of a window overlooking the south lawn. You ever stand up here at night and just look out? He didn't wait for an answer. It doesn't feel real at first. He stared ahead. It hits you in waves, what this place is. What it does to people. Maher stepped closer. So why'd you invite me tonight? Really? Trump hesitated. Then, because I don't want to just talk to people who clap. Maher raised an eyebrow. You could have fooled me the last 6 years. Trump nodded slightly. Yeah, well, everyone plays a role. They stood there, side by side. A late-night breeze rustled the hedges below. Somewhere in the distance, a helicopter thumped softly overhead. I don't think we'll ever agree on the big stuff, Maher said. But I can't lie. Tonight's different. Kid Rock walked up beside them. I told you, man. You get in a room with someone, look 'em in the eye. It's not the same as trash talking. Behind a mic. Maher turned. You think this changes anything? Kid Rock shrugged. Doesn't have to, but it proves something. What's that? People can argue without burning each other down. That counts. Dana finally spoke. The public wants blood online, on stage, on every channel, but maybe, he exhaled, maybe people are starting to burn out on all the noise. Trump leaned against the window frame. They are. I feel it. Even my base. They're still loyal. But they're tired. Everyone is. A pause. It's like the whole country is holding its breath and doesn't know when to exhale. Maher looked around the group. So now what? We post a selfie and call it unity? Trump shook his head. No cameras, no statements, no fake smiles. A beat. Just this. 4 guys. 1 table. A bunch of bad history and a weird moment of honesty. They all nodded. For a long moment, they just looked out into the dark. Maher pulled out his phone. Not to take a picture, just to check the time. Later than he thought. He had a flight in the morning. The studio would be expecting him back. Kid Rock stretched. "All right, I'm tapping out. That duck put me in a coma." Trump smirked faintly. "Thanks for coming, Bob." Kid Rock walked off, hands in his pockets. Dana followed, offering a quiet nod before disappearing down the hallway. Maher lingered. Trump didn't say anything else. Just looked out, like he was watching something in the trees only. He could see Maher finally spoke. "I'll give you this. You know how to keep people guessing." Trump smirked. "That's half the job." They shook hands. Nothing dramatic. No cameras. No announcement. Just two men who had said too much to say nothing at all. Maher turned and walked. Back toward the main hall, the sound of his shoes echoing softly behind him. As he stepped into the night air, he realized something. The strangest part of the evening wasn't what was said. It was how human it all felt. The car was warm, quiet. No music, just the low hum of the engine and the occasional shuffle of leather as he shifted in his seat. He looked out the tinted window, empty sidewalks, red lights blinking over still intersections. Washington felt less like the capital and more like the backdrop of a long, strange dream. The driver didn't speak. Maher appreciated that. He wasn't ready to explain anything, not even to himself. He stared straight ahead, trying to process it all. The table, the talk, the Lincoln bedroom, Trump's non-answer about a third term, and the way it had all felt. At the hotel, Bill opened his notes app, just to jot something down before the moment slipped away. The scariest thing tonight wasn't the answers. It was how easily the conversation happened, the laughter, the agreement, the silence. He stared at the words for a while, then locked his phone. The lobby was empty except for a tired front desk clerk, pretending not to watch YouTube behind the counter. Bill gave a faint wave and headed straight for the elevator. Inside his room, he kicked off his shoes, loosened his tie, and sank into the chair by the window. He could still hear Trump's voice like it hadn't fully left the air around him. What if the game's rigged? That line stuck. Because no matter where you sit on the spectrum, whether you wear red hats or roll your eyes at them, there's a creeping thought. Maybe the whole system is frayed, not broken, just exhausted. He leaned back and closed his eyes. Kid Rock had said something too, something Bill hadn't fully absorbed in the moment. You can only yell across the aisle for so long before you forget what your own voice sounds like. Yeah, he thought about his own audience, the ones who cheered every time he skewered someone, the ones who didn't want nuance, who wanted victory, not conversation. Then he thought about Trump's people, fiercely loyal, angry, tired of being talked down to, different sides, same fatigue. What had this dinner been, really? A stunt, a gesture, or just a weird pause in the shouting? A timeout from the circus? Bill reached for the remote, then stopped. He didn't want news. He didn't want commentary. He didn't even want comedy. He just wanted the quiet to stay quiet a little longer. Instead, he picked up his phone and typed another line. Sometimes the loudest truth comes out when nobody's trying to win. He saved it. Put the phone face down. He wasn't naive. One dinner didn't fix anything. No policies were rewritten, no beliefs overturned, no audience converted. But it wasn't nothing. It was 4 people talking. No cameras, no scripts, no safety of applause. That had to mean something. Maybe not to the public. But to Bill, it meant a lot. Still, he knew the hardest part wasn't over. It was deciding whether or not to tell this story at all. The next morning, Bill sat at his desk. A half-drunk coffee, a legal pad he hadn't used in years. He wasn't sure what to write. Not because he had nothing to say, but because he had too much, and none of it fit into a headline. How do you tell people you shared duck with Donald Trump and left with more questions than you came in with? How do you admit that in between the jabs and barbs you caught glimpses of something eerily familiar in a man you've spent a career mocking? He could already hear the backlash. A sellout, a traitor, a secret conservative, or worse, reasonable. But what really bothered him was the idea that he might be misunderstood for telling the truth. He scribbled something down, scratched it out, tried again. It's easier to yell at someone you've never met. It's harder to hate someone who's just poured you a glass of wine. That was the truth. They hadn't become friends, no warm hugs, no phone numbers exchanged. But they talked, they listened, they disagreed, and somehow, nobody left. The room angry, that alone felt revolutionary. He thought back to the Lincoln bedroom, the weight of the words behind glass, the way Trump looked at that document, not like a tourist, but like someone trying to place himself inside history. That was the moment that stuck with Bill, because for all the chaos Trump brought, for all the controversy and confusion, he was still, in the end, a man chasing legacy. A man who wanted to be remembered for more than headlines and haters. And maybe that's what made the night feel so real. Because beneath all the politics, all the ego, all the noise, there was something profoundly human about four men, from opposite corners of culture, sitting down for one meal, and talking like people. Bill closed the notebook, leaned back. He wasn't going to make a big speech about it on his next show. He wasn't going to post photos or clips, or try to go viral. Some moments don't belong to the internet. Some moments are meant to live only in the minds of the people who were there. But if there was one takeaway, one thing he wished everyone could understand, it was this. When you sit down with someone you think you hate, you usually find out you were both wrong. He looked out the window. The sky was clearing. The noise was already returning. Emails, texts, headlines, the same old grind. But for just a second, he held on to the silence of that room, the weight of the Gettysburg Address, the absence of applause, the strange sense of peace that came from no one trying to win. He picked up his pen and wrote one last line. You don't have to agree with someone to understand them, but you do have to sit down and listen. And maybe that was the whole point of the dinner. Not to change minds, not to rewrite the world, but to remind us that beneath the noise, we're still capable of something simple,